Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for LabStats' first Tech Talk. I'm Derek, I'm a tech support specialist here at LabStats, and I'm joined here by our product manager, John Felushko, who's here to talk about LabFind today. How you doing, John?
Doing great, how you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for asking. Thanks for joining us. Real quick, as a quick note, for those of you who are watching the webinar, we do have a Q&A section there where you can submit, upvote, and comment on other questions. At the end of the webinar, we will be answering as many of those questions as we can. And for those we're not able to get to, we will reply in writing. So please send your questions in. So John, LabFind, can you explain to us exactly what it is and what it does a little bit?
Sure, love to. So LabFind is our new mobile app that launched about a month ago. It's available for Android and Apple phones. And it very simply allows students to search for and find any of the assets you have in LabStats and get directions to those with availability live in real time.
Okay. And why is LabFind a significant development for university IT staff? Why do they care?
Well, LabFind helps university IT staff directly support their mission of helping students succeed.
Yeah.
When we were thinking about LabFind, we've been talking to a lot of our customers, and we, for a long time, thought about LabStats as a way to help you optimize and justify your IT resources.
Yeah.
But for many years, we've had schools using LabStats to help publish through lab maps, through custom displays.
Like using the API, right?
Using the old API, yeah, the existing API, and to do custom displays to show students what was available, where it was available. And this had radically changed students' experience of their IT. At schools that track those things, by law, a lot of schools in the UK, for example, have to do a survey every year asking students their perception of the availability of resources on campus, IT resources on campus. And we knew that publishing that information radically changed students' perception of what was available to them. And we wanted to make that easier. We wanted to put that in a format that every student would have access to, using the technology that everybody carries around in their pockets. So the first way LabFind helps students is by putting the ability to search for and find those resources on their phone. So we have a student who's new to campus, or a student who's taking their first course that involves a computer lab,
or an international student,
or an international student
to school.
Yeah, any of those categories, they can pull out their phone, download LabFind, and search for whatever resource they need, whether that's a piece of software like Photoshop or SPSS, whether that's a piece of hardware like a 3D printer or a projector, whether that's space. Hey, I just need the least busy lab on campus right now. I'm going to be there for 8 hours. I want to be in the quietest possible space.
Yeah.
And you can just do that, get on LabFind, search for those requirements, and get directions to them. So you don't have to know the campus. You don't have to recognize what the name is of the lab.
And that leads into the concept we talk about, which is discoverability, right? Being able to find what it is you need as quick as possible.
Yeah, one of the rules we have at LabStats when we're developing software is it doesn't matter what features we have in the product, it matters what features the users can find.
Right.
And it's exactly the same for university IT staff. It doesn't matter what resources your campus has, it matters what resources students and instructors know exist. So one of the things we found out talking to students and looking at campuses and looking at the research, 60% of instruction hours in US higher education is done by part-time instructors. Very often, those instructors are on campus for just a few hours a week. We have a really high turnover. Many of those instructors, this is their first time on campus.
They could know even less than the students about where stuff is.
Very often they do. And so LabFind allows them to actually, you can be enrolled in multiple organizations on LabFind as a user. So a contract instructor or a student who's enrolled in multiple schools can have all those schools set up on LabFind, search for what you're looking for on campus, see the availability, see what exists.
Okay.
So this doesn't just help students, it helps instructors plan courses. If I'm an engineering instructor wondering, hey, can I do a 3D printing assignment as part of this course? I can go to that school's LabFind, search for the 3D printer, see how many are available, and change my instruction accordingly.
And then tell students, right, here's where you can go to do this project we're assigned. Here's a couple of 3D printers. These typically have low usage or something like that.
Yep, and this is how, hey, and here's LabFind. You can find them for yourself when you're ready to do this project.
Okay. And as far as IT staff goes, what does LabFind allow IT staff to do that they weren't able to do before?
Well, one of my favorite things is allow them to change availability on the fly. So it's the typically slightly chaotic beginning of a new school year. There are
right now for most of
right?
you.
Thank you for taking the time in September to talk to us and listen to us. We know this is a challenge. And course sections are appearing and disappearing on the calendar. Instructors are walking in and suddenly saying, I need a lab.
Yeah.
I need this resource. I need that resource. And as the availability of those resources appears and disappears, as the schedules change, you can just change your schedules right in LabStats, and that's automatically reflected directly in LabFind.
So let's talk a little bit about the things they need to have set up for LabFind to work. LabFind is going to pull based on the group structure.
Yep.
In LabStats.
Yep.
And you need to make sure you have a schedule assigned to the group, right? If there's no schedule, it's not going to show up in LabFind.
Yeah, so you need to have the resources, so the groups and the accessories assigned to them for them to show up. You need to tell us what time they're available. You need to give us a schedule. And you also need to add a location in space. So we have a field where you can put in an address and a GPS location. We prefer both. Both help the navigation, make the navigation more accurate.
Okay.
At the moment, the best way to do that is to put the GPS coordinates of the door you feel like students will most commonly access.
And that is where the app will guide them.
That will be the guide. And then from in there, they get inside the cloud, inside the building. Some campuses are set up in Google Maps or Apple Maps, is what we're using for navigation, to actually do navigation inside buildings. And if your campus is one of those, you can use the room number as the address.
And other things they'll need to do is make sure they have tags assigned to stations or to groups. For example, if you have a projector available in a particular room, you can assign a tag stating projector to the rooms.
Yeah, we have a specific LabFind selection box where you select what resources are available in that lab. So when you set up that lab in LabFind, yep, here's a lab, here's the address, here's the GPS coordinates.
Okay, perfect.
Then you can go through and click through our list. And that list will keep growing. But right now it has things like printers, projectors, space. And you can even have rooms that don't have a computer necessarily, but have a projector, for example, and say, hey, here's a space with a projector, it's currently open.
You do a meeting room or something like that, okay.
Absolutely, and that's really important because so much more work is now group-based on campus, and we want students to be able to work as a group, work together. We know that's one of the major uses of computer labs currently. When we go on campus and talk to students, we hear, hey, students are using computer labs to either do homework together or to work on group projects together. And we wanted them to very quickly be able to use the app to find spaces appropriate for that.
Okay, so speaking of that app, a lot of universities already have a student app. So how does LabFind fit into the current campus technology environment?
So we developed LabFind for sort of the lowest common denominator. Any school can get it. Any school can open it. The first day we had LabFind available, 36 schools had it set up and running to some extent.
Within 24 hours?
Within 24 hours. In testing, I repeatedly got a LabFind instance up and running in less than 5 minutes total. So It's a very low labor investment, very quick and easy to get into. If you do decide you want to build something custom inside your own app ecosystem, whatever your school is using, we have LabFind is built on our new API, and that new API is available to all LabStats users.
And it just uses information only from the API. So they already have the tools, especially those with the cloud instance, and it'll be coming to on-prem soon.
Yeah.
But those with the cloud instance, they can build the exact same thing using the API.
They have access to all of the same information that we're using, that we use to build and power LabFind. So schools that want to build a custom one, go for it. I'd love to talk to you. I want to understand how that process is working for you, and we might be able to coach or assist in some way to help you to explain how we use the,
or learn something from
API, and we also want to learn something from you. That sounds like a great senior project to me for computer science students, or if you have interns.
Okay, perfect. So we talked a little bit about the process of getting up and started, getting things running. What should a university IT leader keep in mind when they're looking at, okay, we're developing LabStats or LabFind? Obviously, this isn't going to take a ton of time. Are there any other considerations they should keep in mind when they're getting things up and running?
First, it's included in the price you're already paying. It's included in LabStats. We didn't want to charge any more. We know even if we just charged $1, that would have been a lot of labor, a lot of logistics to get that purchase order through. We wanted to make it really, really simple and fast for people to get set up. So it's included, it's low labor. If your LabStats is set up to give you good, clean data, you'll be able to set up LabFind in minutes.
Perfect, perfect. And what resource, I mean, this is another app, right? We just talked about this. What resources are available to help students download, to help student adoption of LabFind? How do we get the word out?
So we've created, our excellent marketing team has created a whole number of tools to help you increase adoption. We created email templates, social media templates, slides for instructors to put in their presentations to students to say, hey, this is the course, this is what we're doing.
You're going to need these things.
You're going to need these things. Here's how you find them. Posters and lock screens that you could use in labs or at printers at the point of pain with QR codes in all of those formats so that students can simply point their smartphone at the QR code, get the link to download the app, and get it down fast and easy.
Because there could be a lab, a lab just upstairs. Right? They're coming into the heavy use lab where there's a line out the door. We've seen this, right? Yeah. There's a line out the door, and it's like there's a lab, one floor up, but nobody knows about it.
Yeah, I had a really interesting conversation with somebody from one of the big West Coast public schools, and they were saying that their main lab on the main floor of their library very frequently had a line out the door, and one 10 feet away downstairs would be empty. And by simply publishing, in their case, before LabFind came out, simply publishing that on a digital display, evened out that usage, drastically increased students' perception of the availability of resources across their campus.
And so, at least right in the next question, how does LabFind improve student experience?
It helps them find what they need, fast and easy. Story I like to tell is when I was in school, I came in during an exam period to do my final assignment for a stats course. And the lab I habitually used, the only one I'd use SPSS on, was closed. And so I went to the next lab in that building, and the next lab in that building, the next lab in that building that was closed. It was 35 or 40 minutes before I found a lab that was open and had SPSS and I could start my homework. Like many, many students today, I had a full-time job and a full-time course load. And I really didn't have that 45 minutes during the exam period.
Could have used that doing other things.
To wander around campus looking for a place to do an assignment. And this is just one of the core things we want to do, is make it easier to find the resources that exist on campus.
And then that allows universities to be able to say, specific places where things are. I mean, as it is right now, typically you got people that are installing very expensive softwares on multiple machines all the way across campus to make sure anybody who needs SPSS, it's everywhere.
Yeah, I ran into a CIO and a CTO this summer. Just happened to be sitting across them at lunch at a conference. And I said, so how many machines, what percentage of your machines do you have Adobe installed on? And they said, 100%. So excellent. What's your maximum concurrent usage for Adobe Suite? They're like, we have no idea. Well, we can tell you, having looked at hundreds of thousands of computers, millions of hours of lab time, around the world, we can tell you that very rarely does the Adobe Suite, for example, be over about 5% usage. So if your
don't need Adobe,
if your max usage is 5, if your maximum usage is 5%, you don't need to be paying that to be on all the machines, and that applies to many different kinds of software.
Right.
With LabFind, you can cut that back dramatically and still improve the student's perception of availability,
even though it's on 10% of the machines it was on before.
Exactly.
And as a quick aside, there is an article on our support page, on our support site, that does have that marketing kit we talked about a minute ago. It's called How to Encourage Student Adoption of LabFind. We're going to send a link out in email to all of you so that you have that. Getting back into this, we've talked about how LabFind is in continuous development. We're constantly trying to come up with new things we want to add to it. Where do we want to take LabFind in the future? What are we doing with it?
We have lots of plans, but really this depends on how users experience with the adoption. Myself and the engineering director, Trevor, are going to get out on the road this fall we'll be visiting a number of schools and seeing how they're adopting LabFind, seeing how the process is going. You're always taking calls. Our customer support team is always taking calls. We're always listening for what users need. Some things I have on my list that I would like is I'd like to get navigation out of Google Maps or Apple Maps and actually put that in the app.
So currently it opens whatever their default map application is, and we're going to take it out of there. So
and put it
sticks
back in LabFind. Okay. And that's so that we can connect it to lab maps. So that when a user gets to the lab with the resource, a map of that lab pops up and shows them which machine they need to be at, where specifically in that room that resource is available. I also have a goal to add a lot more accessibility options to allow people to tag and add a whole bunch of accessibility features and work with the latest versions of iOS and of Android to make it possible for people with severe disabilities to use LabFind and to find the resources they need to use the labs in the app.
And LabFind could be fantastic for students with accessibility needs, because once again, they can find, if you've tagged your stations or your rooms with specific things, they can find whatever the accessibility is that they need.
Yeah.
On another tangent off of that, how customizable is that? I've got universities always wanting, make sure the brand is out there, the colors, the mascot, whatever it is. They want to make sure that they are involved in what it is the students are using. How customizable is LabFind? How can they make it theirs?
So we've added a feature. If you are a LabStats user, I think most of you are, you can go to your LabStats right now and open under Lab Tools, open LabFind. And as soon as you click to set it up, the very first thing you'll see is the ability to add your logos, your school colors, a primary and a secondary color. That will color the brand and put your logo throughout the app so that it appears as a branded experience for all of your users. That process is really fast. Schofield has been doing it, and our customer success team has been doing that for customers while he's on a walkthrough with them.
Yeah, just helping them. Let's just do this for you real
quick.
You have these things, plug them in.
It's a few minutes of work to make that custom. And we know that's really important to schools. The latest data I've seen says that schools are spending more money to recruit students than educate them. And so we definitely want to support your marketing efforts and your branding efforts.
And then those students that are brought in, you want to make sure they have what they need to succeed too. You want them to be able to get, to move on. Because that's the real reason for doing all this, right? Is to help students get educated and succeed.
Absolutely.
So next question then, I'm sure a lot of people have had security. How are we handling security within LabFind?
So LabFind draws on the LabStats database, but it only draws on that database through a one-way API.
Right.
So the app cannot change any of the data in your database. So that data is secure. No individual data about individual users of computers is available through LabFind at all. Mm-hmm. Those connections aren't built. You can't get at that data.
And we have an encryption setup for that too, right?
Yeah, and then from the registration point of view, students have to register using their university email. But all of that information is hashed with a one-way hash before it's stored. Is not recoverable to us. And I made some decisions, even though potentially it would be very useful for analytics to identify what individual students are searching for.
Yeah.
We didn't want to take that risk to have that data. So that data is never stored. It's never identifiable as to which student's searching for what and where.
And in tandem with that, LabFind is compliant with a number of different legislations across the world, right?
Yeah, we ship the LabFind to all of our customers all around the world, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, all of which have very different and very stringent security requirements
and it's the same product for all of them.
It's the same product for all of them, so the product is compliant in all of those markets to the best of our knowledge.
Perfect. And so you mentioned students sign in with their email the first time, right?
Yep.
And so LabFind is predicated off of the domain name. That's what you register when you first set up LabFind. And then anyone who has an email that matches the domain name can log in. They'll get a confirmation email, and that's how they get in.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no username, there's no password. It's just a single confirmation to their email. tried to make it as simple and fast as possible. When I was doing testing, it was 10 seconds or less from the time I opened LabFind to when I was logged in.
Students don't need another password.
No, none of us need another.
None of us need another password. So we're always looking to learn from our users. We're always looking for new things, you know, that they can teach us. We don't know everything. What are some of the lessons we've gathered already from LabFind feedback or from users, just in general?
So the most important thing that I just keep learning is every school is different. There's so many different combinations of schools' missions, their locations, the type of students they have, that all of their needs are different. Some really basic generalities is we think this will really help out urban campuses where classes are scattered over urban areas.
Yeah, because you got some schools. I grew up next to one where like the campus, there was like 2 campuses were separated by a couple of blocks.
Yeah, and then you have schools like SCAD in Savannah or Portland State where campus is everywhere. I lived in Savannah for 3 years, and up to my last day, I was still finding new SCAD buildings. I think on my way out of town, I was like, oh, I didn't know that was a SCAD building. Okay. And I can't imagine how confusing that is for students. It's also really important for big community colleges where you have many of your students are only taking one course, maybe just one course once.
They're not going to spend a lot of time on campus. They're not going to spend a lot of time figuring out where everything is. They're probably living somewhere else. They're just coming in to do their schoolwork if they need to and leave. I mean, especially those who would have had a laptop when they started, and that laptop may have busted, something went wrong with it, and now they're down a laptop, don't have the funds to replace it. Got to be able to find open.
They need to find
stations.
a lab once to do one assignment. Let's make that process as fast as possible and easy as possible. And we have community college customers with literally hundreds of computer labs scattered over 1,000 square miles. So we want to make that process as easy for them to find as possible.
Right. So we love feedback. We love hearing back on the ideas people think is doing. How can they get involved and provide feedback if they
First of all, just reach out to me directly. John at labstats.com.
Very simple, very easy.
I'm very easy to find. Also, please join our influencer group, influencer.labstats.com. Join it, fill out the form. I have a couple surveys on there of stuff I'd love to know. And then there's places for you to submit your ideas. So you can please just submit your ideas. Let me know what needs to get added to LabFind. Let me know what needs to get added to LabStats. Let me know what annoys you, what doesn't work.
That's one of John's main functions.
And we listen to all that. We have a sophisticated process to track all of those requests, figure out what comes next, what we can do next, and we're constantly evolving the product.
So you review those and then get together with the dev team to say, hey, this is what we want to do. How do we do it?
Yeah, we're launching somewhere between 2 and 3 changes to the product a week. So hundreds of times a year, there's changes, there's additions, there's improvements coming out. And we're always willing to change our priorities and fix whatever your priority is. So just let me know, talk to me.
Perfect. All right. Mike, do we have any questions from people watching?
We've got a bunch of questions.
Bunch of questions. All right. We'll answer as many as we can, and the ones we can't do, as I said, the ones we can't get to, we will be responding to in writing. So,
first question is from Philip Hatfield. He says, we have our own app. And I know we talked on this, but I just want to give you some time to reiterate. We have our own app. Is it possible to integrate LabFind into our app rather than it being separate?
That's a dev question for the most part. The short answer is all the data available through our API. So your options right now are to build your own.
You could rebuild LabFind.
You could rebuild your own inside your app, or use LabFind. But I'd love to talk to you about the specific process in your app ecosystem of how we go about integrating our LabFind. So reach out to me, John at labfind.com. Join the influencer, LabStats.com.
We get confused.
I really wish we went through a long process of naming LabFind that I wish the names had been more separate. The name that tested best had been farther from.
But we all liked LabFind.
Yeah, and more importantly, students did too. So reach out to me, and I'd love to hear about your process and what that would take, and we can talk about it.
Okay, next question is from Carlos. He asks, can we add more than one domain so faculty and staff also can access the app? Currently, the domain feature doesn't work correctly. Having university.edu does not include students.university.edu.
Okay, so the question is, can we add more than one domain into LabFind at this time? For example, if you have university.edu versus students.university.edu, can you use both?
Right now, that's not possible, but that's a request we've had before, and we're looking at how we would go about adding that capability.
So as it is now, you want to use the domain that is going to be in the student's email address.
Absolutely.
That's the important thing at this point in time.
For sure.
Okay, next one is from Adil. And the question is, we noticed the app forces users to detect current location, otherwise the app exits abruptly. Is it possible to allow the app to enter location manually for privacy reasons?
Okay, so the question was, this person has noticed that the app needs location access in order to function. They're asking if there's a way to add that location manually.
Again, that's not a feature of the app as it's currently built, but that's an excellent suggestion. And that's definitely something we'll take back to engineering and see how much work that would be.
Perfect.
Okay, next one is from Kenneth. There should be an option / icon that lets students know that lab assistants are available to help students.
Okay,
I love that. That's a great suggestion.
That's a good suggestion. Have for those of you who may not have heard it, to have an option to let students know that there is a lab assistant available at particular labs for assistance if they need it.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that. I mean, I've got lots of questions. Is there always a lab assistant at labs? It sometimes is their schedule.
There's only certain times during the day.
Yeah, are their schedules the same as the lab hours? Those are things we'd have to figure out how to do.
Okay.
But I could see how that would be very useful.
Okay, we got another one from Carlos. Can we limit the software list to only tracked applications? Currently, the list is way too long. Stuff that is not really in things that would not really interest students, apps that aren't useful to them.
Okay, so the question for those of you who may not have heard it is there a way to limit the list of available applications to search by in LabFind? Is there a way to limit that to tracked applications within LabStats? Because currently it's pulling the entire list and is really, really long for students to look through.
Thanks, Carlos. We've had that suggestion, and we are definitely looking into doing that. That's on our list of to-dos.
Perfect. And the other consideration on that is, there may be students that are looking for applications that might not be tracked as well.
Right.
So something to consider.
Yeah, we always want things to fail gracefully. If you make a search for something that's not there, we don't want you to think, oh, I typed it wrong, I have the name wrong. When someone says, yep, that's the piece of software you're looking for. However, we don't have that on campus.
Okay.
So we need to figure out how to handle that messaging.
Okay.
Okay, next one is from James. Do you have a suggestion for labs used as classrooms, thus not available for certain times, but open for other times, i.e. 5 to 11 p.m.? Saying the lab is open only from 5 to 11 would confuse students that see the lab available during the day.
And that's exactly how we expect people to use schedule. So you can schedule your schedule can be as complicated as you want. You can go there and schedule it as available in between classes and have it not available during classes. The concept of maybe having an alert that says it's in class, we'd have to figure out how to handle that so that messaging was clear. But right now with the schedules as they're set up, you can totally schedule it in as many discrete blocks as you would like.
So there's a similar question about what to do with when dealing with building hours that change during academic breaks. Can you go into a little bit more in depth into how the schedules?
Sure. So the schedules respond real time, and they're not date driven at the moment. That is a project I've developed, but we haven't implemented yet. So you just need to go in there at the beginning when schedules change and change the schedules in LabStats. As soon as you change the schedules in LabStats, it will reflect.
That's an instant update.
Yep, it'll instantly update
right
in
away.
LabFind. So you just have to go in as the schedules change and change them.
Okay. Have another one from Carlos. If a university has several colleges and each college has lab rooms, if the College of Business sets up the app, and later the College of Basic and Applied Sciences sets up their own labs, how does LabFind manage that?
Carlos,
Same
I'm loving the
university,
questions. These are
different
fantastic.
colleges.
So we've encountered for several ways that could happen. If they are separate LabStats instances, you can merge those separate LabStats instances into the same LabFind experience. So LabFind is capable of taking theoretically an unlimited number of separate LabStats instances and merging them together into the same LabFind experience. You'll see a button at the bottom of the setup page that lets you do that.
That means the students will see both the College of, Applied Sciences over here and, the auto mechanics over here, the IT one over here, and they'll be able to access all of it within the same LabFind.
Yeah. And it's much easier if they're joining the existing LabStats instance.
There's a lot less setup to be done.
Yeah. In that case, as soon as the client's installed on those machines and the groups exist,
Schedules are assigned.
you create the schedules,
Okay.
given an address, and just shows up in LabFind as soon as you select that group.
Okay, next one is from James, and there's a couple that are like this.
Okay, so this will cover a few questions. All right.
So can photos of the lab building be used instead of the logo on the app?
So he's asking, can photos of the lab building itself be used instead of the logo that shows up on the app itself?
Yeah, I think there's only a size limit for that logo. So you could upload any image you chose. I don't think there's anything to prevent that.
I think we're talking about
to clarify, yeah, not the logo, but the image of the lab. So
if they select the lab.
When you're doing a search and you're seeing.
So here's another
there
question.
You go.
I noticed some screenshots that actual building picture shows up in LabFind, like on our website, the actual building picture. Ours just shows up a generic picture. How do we update that?
So right now that capability is not built out. The screenshots are of a future version that we're working on. And so we're looking at a couple different ways to solve that. Probably what the default will be, that picture will be populated without whatever Google's picture of that lab is. And then Trevor and I were talking about today about allowing a manual override and allow you to manually upload images. But the short answer is we haven't built that feature yet. We intend to, and that's coming on a future release.
So then the idea between the Google integration is that, universities could take control of their particular listing in Google and then be able to put in the images they want there. They're only doing it in one place. They're not having to update LabFind 2.
Right.
Remember another place we got to get these images out to. So something to keep in mind.
And that was our initial plan, but in conversations with customers, we're finding that a lot of IT orgs aren't the owners of their buildings in Google.
That makes sense.
And so we thought, okay, let's add an easier option as well. But if you want to become the owner of your buildings in Google, Mike has some instructions, some advice on how to go about and do that, and you can reach out to us and we can talk you through that process.
Okay, next question is from Michael. Are you planning to allow CSV uploads of schedules? Some of the classrooms have complex schedules, and adding them is quite tedious.
That is a request. Thank you. Mike's asking about adding CSV, like CSV uploads of schedules. That's a request we've had. We are looking into it, and if we figure out a way to do it, that's definitely a feature I want to add.
Okay, next one is from Adil. Are there ways to advertise labs on the LabFind app for other schools within the university who don't use LabStats on their computers?
So you can create labs without having LabStats installed on those machines.
You would create a group.
You would create
in LabStats and then not populate it with any machines.
Right.
And you could tag it with information.
Yeah.
About what's in there. But you don't have to have clients installed on machines. As long as you have the group in there and it's got a schedule and it meets the LabFind requirements and it's checked to show up in LabFind, it'll show up in LabFind.
It will, but there won't be any real-time availability information because you don't have the client installed.
Right. So you can see there's a lab there. You can tag it with specific information, but
and I know
you won't know how full it is.
We have a current customer who's doing that as a way to sort of encourage broader adoption of LabStats across campus.
Okay, this will be our last question from Missy Border. Will we be able to edit our name? For example, OED is over several campuses. So you would see several names of your campus, and only when clicking on it do you discover which campus it is.
So the names that appear when you're searching for labs?
I think this is maybe if they add several campuses.
Underneath one.
Let's see. Maybe have Missy clarify.
That might be a great question to call us on. We can get some more details. There should be a way to edit most of the names. The names that
Yeah.
appear in search are just based on your group names. So you can edit your group names at any time. And your organizational name, we can talk about how to do that.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
We'll do another one.
Okay, one more question.
Yep. From Alex. Is LabFind / mobile integration available for on-premises install?
It isn't at the moment. It is something we are actively working on. And as soon as it's ready, we'll let you know.
Okay, perfect. Well, all right, that's all the time we have right now. Thank you all so much for attending. We really appreciate y'all being here. Keep your eyes out for more tech talks. We're going to be announcing them in our newsletter. So if you haven't already subscribed to LabStats newsletter, you can go ahead and do so. As we plan to do a few more of these in the coming months. In the meantime, go ahead and set up LabFind. It's really easy and simple to do. And please reach out to either John at labstats.com, or the support team that I'm a member of, or the customer success team. Many of you may know Bree or Schofield with any questions that you have.